They pull 412 bodies from the hospital rubble in Mannheim on February 19th, 1944. And Lieutenant James Carver is the only person who knows exactly why the bombs hit that building instead of the factory 300 yards west. He's not in Mannheim. He's in England. Debriefing room. Sitting across from an intelligence officer who's asking routine questions about Mission 33. Target accuracy, cloud cover, flak intensity. The officer doesn't know yet. The reconnaissance photos haven't come back. Won't come back for another 6 hours. Right now, the officer thinks Mission 33 was another successful strategic bombing run. Another German industrial target eliminated. Another step closer to winning the war. Carver knows different. He's sitting in that metal chair with his flight suit still damp from sweat and altitude cold, and he can't stop seeing it. The building, the red cross on the roof. The moment his hand pulled the release lever anyway, he tells himself it was the right call. Tells himself the intelligence briefing said factory. Tells himself the mission parameters were clear. Tells himself a lot of things that don't change the fact that 5 2,000-pound bombs just fell on a hospital and he's the one who aimed them. Lieutenant, you indicated the Norden bombsight malfunctioned. Can you describe the failure? The intelligence officer's pen is ready, taking notes. Routine. Carver's mouth is dry. He tries to answer, but the words stick, because how do you explain that a $50,000 piece of precision machinery dying meant he had to become the machine instead? That technology failed, so humanity had to choose? That he chose wrong? It went dark mid-approach. No crosshairs, no tone. Manual drop only. His voice sounds distant, like someone else is talking. The officer writes it down, asks about the drop itself. Carver describes it. Doesn't mention the Red Cross, doesn't mention the hospital, just says he targeted the largest rectangular structure with rail access. Textbook targeting, by the book. The officer nods, satisfied. Carver is dismissed. He walks out of the debriefing room, and the February English air hits him like cold water. Across the airfield, ground crews are already prepping his B-17 for the next mission, patching flak holes. Replacing engine 3, loading fresh bombs. The machine keeps running. That's what machines do. They don't stop to question, don't stop to see red crosses. Don't stop to wonder if the intelligence was wrong, or if the bombing was murder, or if there's a difference when you're dropping explosives from 5 miles up. Carver walks to the barracks. His crew is there. Pilot Captain Reed, co-pilot Morrison, navigator Chen, radio operator Davis, the waist gunners, the tail gunner, the ball turret gunner. 10 men who flew Mission 33 together. Reed sees Carver, raises a glass. 33 down, 7 to go. 40 missions and we all go home. The crew cheers. They think they're winning, think they're heroes, think Mission 33 was just another number on the tally board. Carver doesn't tell them what he saw, doesn't tell them about the hospital, because maybe he's wrong. Maybe it wasn't a hospital. Maybe the Red Cross was painted there by the Germans to protect a legitimate military target. Maybe the Geneva Convention is just paper, and war is war, and people die, and that's how it works. Maybe. He pours himself a drink. Bourbon. American. Tastes like home. Tastes like the life he left behind in Ohio, where he taught high school mathematics, and the most complicated problem was finding X, not deciding which building to bomb. 6 hours later, the reconnaissance photos arrive. Carver is lying on his bunk when Davis bursts in. You're not going to believe this. Mission 33 photos are back. We missed the factory. Carver sits up, asks what they hid instead. Davis doesn't answer right away, just stares at the photo in his hand, finally shows it. Black and white aerial shot. The target building, destroyed. 5 impact craters. Rubble. And in the corner, barely visible, a piece of the roof, white with a red cross. It was a hospital, Davis says quietly. Intelligence got it wrong. The factory was 300 yards west. We hit the city hospital. He's waiting for Carver to react. Waiting for shock, anger, something. Carver just nods. I know, he says. I saw the cross before I dropped. The room goes silent. Davis stares at him. You saw it? And you dropped anyway? Carver doesn't have an answer that makes sense. Doesn't have an answer that makes him anything other than what he is. A man who saw a hospital and bombed it because the orders said drop, and the fuel said drop, and the mission parameters said drop, and maybe that's enough, or maybe it's not, but it's too late now, because 412 people are already dead. If you're still watching this, you need to understand something. This isn't a story about a mistake. This is a story about a choice. Stay with me, because what happens next is what separates the men who sleep at night from the men who don't. February 18th, 1944. Mission briefing. 0600 hours. Carver walks into the briefing room with the rest of his crew, and the wall map shows today's target. Mannheim, Germany, industrial city, ball-bearing factories, railway nexus, strategic value high, expected flak heavy, fighter resistance moderate. The intelligence officer points to a red circle on the map. Primary target is here. Factory district. Rectangular structure. Rail access. Approximately 200 feet by 400 feet. Your Norden site should have no trouble acquiring it. Carver writes it down in his notebook. Rectangular structure. Rail access. Simple. He's done this 32 times. 32 successful missions. Never missed a target. Never questioned the intelligence. Never had a reason to. The briefing ends. Crews disperse. Carver walks to his B-17. She's called Lucky Lady. Painted nose art. Pin-up girl holding bombs like bouquets. Ground crew chief gives him the thumbs up. All systems green. Norden bombsight calibrated. Bombs loaded. 5 2,000-pounders. High explosive. Enough to level a city block. 08:15. Engines start. The B-17 roars to life. 4 Wright Cyclone engines. 1,800 horsepower each. The sound is overwhelming. Beautiful, mechanical symphony. Reed taxis to the runway. Gets clearance. Throttles up. The bomber accelerates. 50 miles per hour. 60. 80. The tail lifts. The wheels leave the ground. They're airborne. Mission 33 is underway. The flight to Mannheim takes 2 hours. Formation flying. 300 B-17 seconds. Flying in tight groups called boxes. Protection in numbers. If fighters attack, the combined defensive fire from 300 bombers creates a wall of bullets nothing can fly through. That's the theory. Reality is messier. Carver sits in the nose. Bombardier position. Plexiglas bubble. 360-degree view. He can see everything. The English countryside below. The Channel. The French coast. Then Germany. Flak starts over the Rhine. Black puffs of smoke. 88mm shells exploding at altitude. The Germans have the range. Shells burst close. The B-17 shudders. Shrapnel pings off the fuselage like hail. Reed's voice crackles on the intercom. Flak heavy. Stay sharp. Carver watches the black clouds bloom around them. Watches one shell detonate 50 feet away. Watches the B-17 to their right take a direct hit. The wing separates. The bomber spins. Falls. No parachutes. 10 men gone in 3 seconds. They press on. Deeper into Germany. The formation holds. The target is 20 minutes away. Carver activates the Norden bombsight. Powers up. The machine hums. Gyroscopes spin. Optics align. He inputs the data. Altitude, wind speed, target coordinates. The Norden takes over. It's flying the plane now, linked directly to the autopilot. Reed's hands are off the controls. The machine decides when to turn, when to level, when to drop. All Carver has to do is keep the crosshairs centered on the target. 10 minutes to target. The Norden locks onto the approach vector. The B-17 adjusts course. 5 degrees left. Leveling, steady. The formation spreads out. Each bomber taking its individual approach. No room for error at this stage. Carver peers through the optics, looking for the target, searching the city below. There, red brick building, rectangular, exactly as briefed, rail lines behind it. That's it. He centers the crosshairs. The Norden calculates. Wind drift, bomb trajectory, release point. Everything is automatic now. Everything is perfect. Everything is going exactly according to plan. 5 minutes to target. The Norden bombsight screen flickers. Just once. Carver blinks. Thinks it's his imagination. Thinks the altitude and cold and adrenaline are playing tricks. Then it flickers again. The numbers on the display stutter, freeze, reset. Carver's stomach drops. He taps the sight. The numbers stabilize. Maybe just a power fluctuation. Maybe nothing. Maybe. 3 minutes to target. The Norden goes completely dark. No crosshairs, no numbers, no tone, just blank glass and the mechanical hum of a machine that's no longer calculating anything. Carver hits the reset switch. Nothing. Checks the power feed. Solid. The Norden is receiving power. It's just not working. $50,000 of precision technology dead at the worst possible moment. Bombardier. Status. We're 2 minutes from target. Reed's voice is tense. The formation is committed. Can't turn back. Can't abort. Fuel too low. Too deep into Germany. The bombs have to drop. That's not negotiable. Carver keys his mic. Norden is dead. No crosshairs. No auto-release. I'll have to manual drop. Silence on the intercom. Manual drop means human eyes, human judgment, human error. Accuracy drops from 50 feet to 500 feet. Maybe worse. Can you acquire the target visually? Reed asks. Carver presses his face to the plexiglass, searches the city below, finds the red brick building, rail lines, rectangular. Exactly where it's supposed to be. Affirmative. I have visual on primary target. Reed's voice is all business now. Bomb bay doors open. Manual release armed. Drop on your judgment. 1 minute to target. Carver reaches for the manual release lever. His hand closes around cold metal. Through the plexiglass, he can see the target getting closer. The B-17 is doing 200 miles per hour. At this speed, the city below is rushing past. He has to time it perfectly. Drop too early, bombs fall short. Too late, they overshoot. He calculates in his head, wind from the west. Maybe 15 knots. Drift will push the bombs east. He needs to account for that. Needs to drop slightly west of target to compensate. 30 seconds. The target is almost directly below. Carver's finger tightens on the release. He's watching the red brick building, watching it slide beneath them. Watching for the exact moment when the geometry lines up and the wind drift and the bomb trajectory all converge into that 50-foot circle. The Norden would have hit automatically. Except the Norden is dead and Carver is alive and making decisions and seeing things. That's when he sees it. White paint on the red brick roof. A symbol, large enough to see from 25,000 feet. A cross. Red cross on white background. The international symbol for medical facility, protected under Geneva Convention, non-combatant, hospital. Carver's brain freezes. His hand stays on the release lever. The target he's been tracking for the last 10 minutes isn't a factory, it's a hospital. The intelligence was wrong. Or he picked the wrong building, or the Germans converted a hospital into a factory, or a factory into a hospital. Or it doesn't matter because his hand is on the lever and Reed is saying, commit, bombardier, commit now. And there are 5 bombs in the bay and they have to go somewhere. He looks left, west, 300 yards, another building, smaller, smokestacks. That's the factory, has to be. But the B-17 is already past it. Wind drift pushed them east. If he drops now, bombs hit the hospital. If he waits, they miss everything and fall into the residential district beyond. Bombardier, drop now. Reed's voice is sharp, urgent. The fuel gauges are in the red. Engine 3 is sputtering. They can't make another pass. Can't hold formation. Can't stay in German airspace any longer than absolutely necessary. The bombs have to drop, now. Carver looks at the hospital, thinks about what's inside. Wounded, probably German soldiers, enemy combatants, legitimate military target, probably, maybe. The Geneva Convention says hospitals are protected, but it also says they lose protection if used for military purposes. And how is Carver supposed to know from 5 miles up if there are soldiers inside, or civilians, or both, or if it even matters when the orders say drop, and the mission says drop, and the fuel says drop? His hand pulls the lever. 5 bombs release. The B-17 lurches upward, 10,000 pounds lighter. The bombs fall for 23 seconds. Carver watches them. 5 dark shapes tumbling through the sky, watches them disappear into the city below, watches the hospital, watches the impacts. 5 explosions. The building disappears in fire and smoke and dust. When the smoke clears, there's nothing left. Just rubble, just crater, just evidence of what happens when 10,000 pounds of high explosive hits a structure built to heal people instead of withstand bombs. Bombs away. Target destroyed, Carver reports. His voice is mechanical, flat. Reed banks the B-17 away, heading home. The formation regroups. 300 bombers turning west, back to England, back to safety, back to debriefing and mission reports and congratulations for another successful run. Carver sits in the bombardier seat and stares at his hands and wonders when he stopped being a math teacher who solved problems and became a man who creates them. 3 weeks after Mission 33, intelligence receives a report from resistance fighters in Mannheim. The building destroyed by American bombers was Mannheim City Hospital, 412 dead, 314 patients, 68 medical staff, 30 support personnel, 0 military targets. The factory Carver was supposed to hit is still standing, still producing ball bearings, still running at full capacity. Mission 33 was a complete failure, worse than failure. It was a massacre. The intelligence officer who briefed the mission is reassigned. The coordinates were correct. The building identification was wrong. Someone confused the hospital with the factory, drew the wrong circle on the wrong map, made a mistake that killed 412 people. The Army Air Force issues a classified apology to the International Red Cross, blames equipment malfunction and navigational error, never mentions that a bombardier saw the Red Cross and dropped anyway, never mentions that Carver had a choice and made it and has to live with it. Carver flies 7 more missions, missions 34 through 40. The Norden bombsight works perfectly on all of them, never fails, never goes dark, never forces him to choose again. He drops bombs on Stuttgart, Munich, Frankfurt, Cologne, hits factories, rail yards, oil refineries, never misses, never questions. Never looks too closely at what's burning below, because if he looks, he might see another Red Cross. And if he sees another Red Cross, he might have to make another choice, and he can't. He just can't. Mission 40, his last. The crew celebrates. 40 missions completed. Quota fulfilled. They're going home. Reed throws a party. Everyone gets drunk. Everyone except Carver. He sits in the corner with a glass of bourbon he's not drinking and watches his crew laugh and joke and celebrate surviving the war. They don't know about Mission 33. Don't know what building they actually hit. The intelligence photos are classified. The reports are classified. Only Carver knows. Only Carver saw the Red Cross before it disappeared under 10,000 pounds of explosives. He goes home in March 1944, back to Ohio, back to the high school where he taught mathematics. They throw him a parade. Local hero, bomber pilot, 40 missions. Decorated veteran. He smiles for the photos, shakes hands, gives a speech to the students about duty and service, and doing what's right for your country. The students ask questions. How many missions did you fly? 40. How many bombs did you drop? 200. Did you ever get scared? Every time. Did you ever miss? Once. He doesn't tell them about the hospital, doesn't tell them about the 412, doesn't tell them that missing isn't the right word because missing implies you tried to hit something else. He hit exactly what he aimed at. He just aimed at the wrong thing. Carver goes back to teaching. Algebra, geometry, calculus, the mathematics of lines and angles and trajectories, the same mathematics he used to calculate bomb drops, the same numbers. Different context. In class, the problems have right answers, clear solutions. X equals 7. The hypotenuse is 12. The trajectory intersects at point C. Clean. Simple. No variables for whether point C is a factory or a hospital. No equations that account for red crosses and fuel gauges and commanders yelling to commit. He teaches for 36 years, never marries, never talks about the war. Every February 19th, he calls in sick, stays home, doesn't tell anyone why. Just sits in his living room with a bourbon he doesn't drink and thinks about the 412. Thinks about the patients who were in that hospital, the wounded soldiers. The civilian casualties from other bombings, the medical staff trying to save them. Thinks about the fact that he killed more people trying to heal than most soldiers kill trying to fight. In 1980, a German historian publishes a book about Allied bombing campaigns, includes a chapter on Mannheim City Hospital, lists the casualties, 314 patients, including 47 children, transferred from a bombed orphanage, 68 medical staff, including 12 nurses and 6 surgeons. Notes that the hospital was clearly marked with Red Cross designation visible from altitude. Calls it a tragic mistake, result of equipment failure and poor intelligence. Never mentions Carver by name. Doesn't need to. Carver knows. He reads the book 3 times. Memorizes the numbers. 412 total. 47 children. 12 nurses. 6 surgeons. Breaks them down by age, nationality, cause of death. Creates spreadsheets, graphs, mathematical models of casualties. Tries to turn people into numbers because numbers make sense and people don't. Numbers follow rules. People just die when you drop bombs on them, and no amount of mathematics changes that. 1983. Carver is 62 years old, retired from teaching, living alone in the same house he grew up in. One morning he receives a letter. No return address. German postmark. 12. Inside is a photograph, black and white, aerial shot. Mannheim City Hospital before the bombing. Red brick building. Red cross, clearly visible on the roof. On the back, handwritten in English, "My mother was a nurse. She died here. I just wanted you to know she had a name. It was Greta Hartmann." Carver stares at the photograph for 3 hours. Then he writes a letter back, uses the German postmark to trace the city. Sends it addressed to family of Greta Hartmann, Mannheim. Doesn't know if it will arrive. Doesn't know if anyone will read it. Doesn't matter. He writes it anyway. Tells them about Mission 33. The Norden failure. The manual drop. The Red Cross. The choice. The lever. Everything. Apologizes. Knows it means nothing. Knows 412 dead. Don't come back because someone says sorry. Writes it anyway, because it's all he has left. 3 months later, a response arrives. Different handwriting. Younger. Greta Hartmann's daughter. She's 43. Was 4 years old when her mother died. Doesn't remember her. Only knows her from photographs and stories. The letter says she doesn't forgive him because there's nothing to forgive. Her mother chose to work in a hospital during a war. Chose to stay when others evacuated. Chose risk, just like Carver chose to drop. Both choices, both consequences, both people trying to do what seemed right in an impossible situation. The letter ends. War doesn't have right answers, only people trying their best and failing anyway. Carver keeps the letter, keeps the photograph, frames them, hangs them in his study where he used to grade papers and calculate trajectories, looks at them every day. Greta Hartmann's face. Her daughter's handwriting, the Red Cross on the hospital roof. Physical evidence that Mission 33 wasn't just numbers and coordinates and mission reports. It was people, real people. With names, faces, families, people who died because he pulled a lever. January 7th, 2001. James Carver dies in his sleep, 80 years old. no surviving family. The obituary calls him a decorated World War II veteran, bomber pilot, teacher, pillar of the community. Doesn't mention the hospital, doesn't mention the 412. Doesn't mention that he kept a photograph of a dead German nurse on his desk for 18 years because she needed to be remembered, and he was the only one left who knew why. At his funeral, a woman attends. German accent. Mid-60s. She doesn't speak to anyone, just stands in the back during the service. After everyone leaves, she approaches the casket, places a photograph next to it. The same photograph Carver kept in his study. Greta Hartmann, Mannheim City Hospital, Red Cross on the roof. She whispers something in German, a prayer, a goodbye. An acknowledgement that war creates casualties long after the shooting stops. Then she leaves. This isn't a story about making the right choice. It's a story about living with the wrong one. Carver saw the hospital, dropped anyway. Killed 412 people, including 47 children and 12 nurses and 6 surgeons, and spent the rest of his life doing mathematics that couldn't undo what 5 bombs did in 23 seconds. Want to hear more stories about the real cost? The choices that follow you home? Then you need to hear this. War doesn't end when you get off the plane. It ends when you stop counting the casualties. Carver never stopped counting. Subscribe to this channel if you understand that some numbers never add up. Drop a comment with the hardest choice you ever made. Because that's what this is about. Not heroes. Not villains. Just people in impossible situations making decisions they'll regret forever. James Carver made his choice on Mission 33. He lived 57 more years. The 412 didn't. That's the math. That's the cost. That's what happens when machines fail and humans have to aim.